Hey everyone, this is Nick with Tenacity.ai with my co-host Jason. Today we're going to dive into what the FinOps framework is and how it applies to your organization. So I guess Jason, right off the bat, what's the high-level definition here? What's the components of the FinOps Foundation's framework?
They call them core elements. We've talked about some of them in some of our episodes. But principles, personas, phases, maturity, domains, and capabilities are the core elements of the FinOps framework.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on, in a past episode, we touched on principles, and we've touched on personas. We've definitely touched on the life cycle and its phases. From the perspective, and certainly we can link out to those episodes, it's important to identify those, especially the personas inside your organization. It's important to understand, that this is not a one and done. This is absolutely a life cycle. You're gonna continue to go through the phases continuously. Continue to go through continuously. That's a horrible way to put that. So from inform, optimize, operate, and continue that feedback loop.
Yep.
And I think, from the principles, there's 6 principles. It's important to understand them. They are, if I were to relate this back to sort of an execution framework for a business or a startup, this is kind of your core values, right? It's your things to fall back on when you're, trying to understand the direction you should take or how you should implement something. You fall back to these principles as sort of your pseudo core values for this particular framework. So let's talk then a little bit about, we can dive into any of those, but I think it's important maybe to touch on, maturity and what organizations should expect. Because I think that sometimes people have in their head this picture. I know I've certainly experienced this with ITIL, I've experienced it with Agile. They have this perfect picture in their head of what they're going to have next week when they're done implementing FinOps. That's not really the way that frameworks work. What should you expect kind of day one versus, day 100 and
I actually really like, I really like the maturity the maturity guidelines they have because one, they're simple, right? Crawl, walk, run. Second reason is, especially with technologists like you and I are I don't know if it's like one of the things that happens often is we think we got to run immediately. We think we got to jump all the way to run. We've got to do it right first, right? But that's not necessarily true. The goals should be set around, first off, they should be contextual to the business, right? So it should be the KPIs and goals you have for your FinOps model should be aligned with the organization and its maturity and the number of people. But also when you talk about what the goals you are, what you want to achieve over the course of time, right? You said, I think day 90 versus day 100 or day 90 versus day 1,000, whatever it ends up being, right? Is to align it with crawl, walk, run, right? And they're really broken down quite nicely on the website, but if you can allocate half of your environment, you're crawling, right? Running is being able to allocate 90 to 100% of your environment, right? So it's important to start to track where you are today, right? To get the baseline, and then to start to understand where you are from a maturity perspective. There are other functions of each of these maturity models. I used the simple one, allocation, but there's also, goals around commitment-based, goals around forecasting spend and accuracy. But if you could set your KPI goals so that you can crawl, walk, run, organizations have a much easier time adopting something like this when we're easing into it.
Yeah, I think I think that sums it up pretty well. I think there's components of the framework that you just don't need to sink a lot of time into early on. But there's other components that you do want to put a little time into to try and understand early, or at least in the middle. Allocation is a really good example of that. Like, probably want to spend some time early on getting allocation right, but shared costs, probably not going to worry about those until we're further in the journey, just because they're not that big of an impact. But allocation, if you don't get it right early on, if you're not thinking about it early on, it can cause a lot of problems for you later. And so that's sort of how I think about it. I think I could, and some of our listeners might agree here. I think I could bifurcate technologists into two camps: those who love the analogy of crawl, walk, run and use it all the time, and those who absolutely hate it because it has zero definition, but it describes a really good concept. And Jason and I fall on the two sides of this because it's a good analogy. But I'm always like, man, well, what is my crawl?
Yeah. Well, I also think that some of it's arbitrary, right? You have to define your own crawl, walk, run. I mean, even if you go look at their site, and they kind of give you some ideas to define crawl,
their
walk,
site
run.
being FinOps.org.
FinOps.org, sorry. One of the things that they outline for crawl, walk, run is to forecast your spend with some level of accuracy. And the values that are used as sample values to me are it's like, okay, well, if you're crawl, you can forecast a 20% accuracy. If you're walk, it's 15, and if you're run, it's 12. To me, that's a little it's like, well, so wait a minute, if I can forecast my spend accurately to 12.5%, am I not in the running scenario? It's like, anyway, yeah. I completely understand what you're saying. I think the point of that sort of methodology is to not, it's all it is breaking down a problem in three different, that you could name it whatever you want. It's just breaking down a project or a problem. You're right. Breaking down a project or a problem into multiple steps so that you don't get paralyzed by needing to accurately allocate 90+% of your environment. Let's start with 50. Get 50. You'll be good. Then we can set the next goal, right? And so, I do agree, though. It is. We sit on both sides of that fence, I guess.
We do.
Yeah.
It's funny sitting in a room full of people who keep who are always using the terminology, and then at the end you ask, well, wait a minute, where are we? And everybody has a different answer.
Yeah.
So,
that's true.
So.
That's why it's good to define it. By the way, that's why it's good to define what your KPRs. Just to add this point, defining what your crawl, walk, or run KPIs are, so that everybody's clear, eliminates some of that confusion. And it should be pretty. Yeah, and I know we have to pick what those KPIs are for our business, but
the best way I've seen the analogy used. Not necessarily the model, but the analogy used is when someone throws on the table something that's clearly a run and we're at crawl, and it allows the team to go, hold on, sailor, like, I get we're supposed to go there, but we're still rowing a lifeboat right now. Let's focus on that before we're figuring out how to sail this schooner. So, all right, let's jump into domains and capabilities. What does that mean? What's a domain in FinOps?
Oh, well, a domain is, I would say it's a capability, or they would represent a hierarchy of the capabilities that FinOps aims to give organizations, right? And so there's at a high level, there's understanding cloud usage and cost, and there's a whole bunch of specific things that fall underneath understanding cloud usage and cost that are capabilities, right? So that domain includes unit costs, shared costs, anomalies, forecasting, things like that. So another domain would be performance tracking and benchmarking, so setting KPIs and tracking your goals to that. Real-time decision-making driven by data, cloud, rate, and usage optimization, and then organizational alignment are the domains in FinOps. And then those domains are broken down into capabilities.
Okay. So it sounds like some of the components that someone who's implementing FinOps needs to think about it from sort of maturity level. How do I crawl? How do I walk? How do I run? Is cloud usage, right? So the crawl side of it is just being able to get basic usage statistics.
Right.
I'm not even dividing it up into the business context yet. I'm just trying to get my usage statistics to me. I'm going to have to go through the exercise of actually doing allocation, tagging my environment, understanding what metadata I have or what metadata I need, and make sure that I'm producing it. I'm going to have to go through the step of when infrastructure is created. Here on out, I need the metadata applied to it immediately. I need to identify things that have been deployed that don't have the metadata, right? Those are the sorts of things I got to think about from a cloud usage perspective. When we think about optimization is an easy kind of catch-all term, but I think you just bifurcated it there too, that there is rate optimization versus usage optimization. Those are two very different things that need to be thought about. And it's important to think about them contextually and together in that if I don't use something, I don't need to optimize its rate. I should go find things I don't need, get rid of them, and then worry about rate optimization or all the stuff I actually do need. So those are the sorts of things that you want to think about. You might start by trying to identify, where do I have opportunities around rate optimization, or where do I have opportunities around usage optimization, and trying to make those early decisions. One of the things that happens in organizations is they might make decisions around rate optimization early in order to just buy themselves time. Like, I'm just going to get a savings plan. I'm going to save myself 22% right now while I go figure out all the other usage optimization I need on these lift and shifts that I did. Then they reevaluate that rate optimization a year later, right? Those sorts of things happen. So
Absolutely.
Jason, what advice do you have then for, taking into consideration the components here of the FinOps Foundation's framework? And by the way, you can go out to finops.org and read about it yourself. They're constantly updating this information. It's a really awesome resource, and a whole lot of good people out there that are contributing to this project. So what advice do you have for folks who have taken these components? They understand that there's personas and there's principles and there's a life cycle to follow, and there's domains they need to worry about, and they're going to be on this maturity journey. What should they do first? Like they need to get started, or maybe they're just starting the journey. What advice would you give them?
Well, I think, to kind of summarize what we've talked about here, right? If you understand, the areas and the framework, and you've kind of laid out from an organizational perspective what you want to attack first, it's, setting those KPIs or goals, and then starting to track against them. As an example, if your goal is to allocate 50% of your environment and you have 20% right now, right, you've got a ways to go on that. So I think the first place to start, and this is defined right in the framework, right, in the phases. The first phase is to start with inform, and inform, gives you visibility, allows you to allocate your environment, properly budget and forecast out into the future. So that's where I would start with the inform phase, set realistic, smart goals for the organization on what they want to achieve from either allocate, whatever's important, allocation, anomalies, forecasting, whatever's important to the organization, set those and then start to live up to them.
Yeah, I would take I agree with all of that. I would take a very kind of organizational approach. And this is about people and collaboration. And number one, I would take those principles and I would print them off and I would staple them to the wall. And as I gathered the team, I would make sure that they all had access to that. They all understood it. They all fell back to that as core values. I'd identify those personas, who the team's going to be, start bringing them on board with what I want to do, in the sort of, organizational position or alignment that I'm trying to get to. And then, like you said, start defining those goals and keeping in mind that we're crawling and that we're going to make strides towards walking and running, but we're definitely starting with crawling, and fall back on those principles whenever the the push to run in one area happens. It will inevitably happen when we're not ready in other areas where we're still crawling. So just use those principles, identify your team, really start to build the communication lines, and then define those objectives and get moving on it.
Completely.
Jason, any parting thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. Reach out if you're on this journey and you need help and you don't know who to reach out to. Just reach out to us on LinkedIn or through the comments or through go to tenacity.ai. You can reach out to us there. You can schedule time with us. We're always happy to talk shop on this. This is something we're passionate about. It's something we love, and we want to help. Not just organizations, actually, we want to help you in going on this journey to achieve financial discipline, financial management inside of cloud spending. It's something that the two of us have dealt with our entire career, long before cloud even. Trying to develop unit economics and predict spending. And we live in a much better world now. So reach out. Head up to tenacity.ai, download the Cloud Cost Optimization Handbook, and tune in next time. Thanks so much.